Reclamation of Our Torment, Book 1, RooT, The Trinity Whose Tapestry, Unwove, Act 1, Hope, Abridged. The air in Trisium hung heavy with an acrid stench. A mist of decay and desperation wafted about frivolously that could easily suffocate one's soul. Shattered streets lay beneath a dimly lit sky, the cracked pavements straining beneath the weight of the passage of time and neglect. The city's once ornate pearl walls, who stood grand and proud, now loomed as an oppressive barrier, dictating the fate of its denizens confined within. It was here, amid the desolate ruins of civilization, the three souls labored under thumb of the crushing burden of existence. Gratia Orvant sat on the cold cobblestone, her back against the remnants of an ancient fountain long bereft of water. She gazed into the shadows, her muted heart tethered to an inner turmoil that spoke octaves louder than any words. A finger brushes over the dried petals of a flower she had salvaged, an insignificant remnant of beauty who dared bloom in their forsaken habitat. It was her solace for a spell, a tribute to lost innocence and a reminder that even in darkness, life could still flicker with a hint of colour. Celia, the middle sister, perched on the edge of a crumbling wall, her sharp mind and internal battleground of swirling thoughts. She watched her siblings with keen, observant eyes. Gratia's gentle spirit fought against the despair that smothered their reality, while Elthis, the dear youngest brother, dashed recklessly through the filth-ridden streets like a wildfire yearning for something greater. "What are we doing, sis?" Elthis called out, his voice laced with bravado. He swung a rusted pipe like a sword defiantly against imagined foes that haunted their urban landscape. "We can't just sit here waiting for the demons to come. We need a plan, a real one." Celia sighed, resisting her natural impulse to reprimand him. Though annoying and foolhardy, his bravado proved to be the lighter panache in their otherwise grim existence. She could fault him naught for the courage that burned ever so brightly, albeit impulsively in his heart. It was a quality she wished she could possess in equal measure. "We have to think strategically, Elthis. This is about more than mere survival. We cannot be on the run forever." Gratia's fingers moved swiftly in an elegant and graceful silent motion, a language that Elthis and Celia had learned well over the years. She envisioned mapping their ascent to a higher realm. Clouds beneath their feet, the weight of the city left behind. Her expression mirrored the determination burning from within her heart, the longing for a haven untouched by the encroaching darkness, unsullied by the test of time. "Ascend?" Elthis echoed, a spark of mischief lighting his eyes. "But how? The gates of heaven won't just flay themselves open for us." Celia bristled at the stubbornness in her brother's voice. A hint of frustration had crept into her otherwise calculated demeanor. "That's where the plan comes in. We need to find a way to breach the barrier that keeps us trapped here. The demons grow ever nearer. The city's defenses are crumbling. We no longer have the luxury of time." "Then let's enlist help." Elthis leapt up onto the wall afore his sister, fists angling at imaginary threats beyond the walls. "What if we gather others?" "There has to be those willing to push through." Gratia's eyes flitted toward the horizon, where the ominous grey clouds roiled like the churning hearts of the residents of Trisium. She shook her head subtly, the motion unreadable in the dim light. No one outside cared. Any cries for help here had long since fallen upon deaf ears. "Listen," Celia's tone grew somber, her voice low and measured. "We can't take risks as such, for we know not whom we may trust. The shadows are full of whispers, but whispers can betray." The wind rustled through the trash scattered along the dismal streets, carrying with it the lament of souls trapped within these walls. Gratia took a breath, her spirit guided by an intuition that surged through her veins. She envisioned a gathering place, an ancient altar known only to them, hidden beneath the weight of what remained of a crumbling stone structure in the distance, long forgotten by the rest of the city. Drawing Elthis into her gaze, she gestured to him. "Would that work?" Elthis asked, brow furrowing. "What if we should fail?" Celia leaned back against the stones, pondering the consequences with a frown. "Then we best not fail. If we could use that altar to summon the wisdom of Sylar, he who can forge bonds with the restless spirits beyond, perhaps we can learn how to escape our predicament. It's all or nothing." At the mention of Sylar, the city's most infamous summoner, Gratia's heart quaked with uncertainty. His name was only spoken in hushed tones, merely a figment of folklore, a trickster thought to be powerful yet perilous. Invoking his name could mark the point of no return, yet her heart burned with the reckless desire to know if salvation could emerge from such an alliance. "Does it truly matter?" Elthis said, breaking through her reverie. "What more have we to lose but our own chains?" He lifted his pipe and slammed it down against the ground. "Owning nothing but these shackles, yet look how far we've come already." Gratia turned to look at her brother, his determination vivid as a waking dream. For him, life was a challenge to be faced head-on. She admired that about him, even in her silence. The wall-s surrounding them could crumble, and he would still forge ahead, a reckless knight unhindered by doubt. "Very well," Celia agreed, feeling the weight of responsibility resting squarely on her shoulders. "Let's do this, but we do it carefully. We do it together." Act 2, Ascending Damnation. As twilight descended, the siblings made their way through the maze of Tritium, each step resonating with a newfound vigor. Shadows swirled around them, tendrils of anxiety beckoning closer. Even the demons seemed to echo that unholy thirst for chaos. A struggle that was not merely outside, but deep within the confines of their souls. Gratia led the way, navigating the ruins with an innate sense of direction. The altar was nestled beneath layers of detritus and despair, an island of hope concealed, resonating with the promise of ascent. When they arrived, breathless and wide-eyed before the ancient stones, Gratia pressed her fingers against the cold, weathered surface, feeling a thrum of energy beneath her touch as if time had stopped here. It whispered secrets of the past, urging her to listen, to awaken the spirits that lingered in this sanctum. "This is it," Celia murmured beneath her breath, her eyes flickering with unmasked apprehension and excitement. "We need to summon him, yet only him." Elthis stepped forward, heart racing with adrenaline and defiance. "How do we even start?" Gratia paused, closing her eyes and embracing the quiet space around them. Inside her mind, she visualized the ethereal binding of their energies, an ancient incantation passed through generations. She began to draw symbols in the damp soil, a circle, and invocation of unity crafted through love and determination. One by one, her siblings joined her, hands entwined as they linked the warmth of their fire with hers, breathing together as one. "Syla, we call upon you," Sylia whispered, voice steadying as she unleashed the edges of her fear into the beautiful abyss of possibility. It echoed in their hearts, drumming against the walls of their very vessels like the patter of rain against fragile roofs. Elthis added his voice, bold and booming. "Show us the way, teach us how to ascend to the heavens." His fervour reverberated through the air, calling forth the spirits trapped between realms, nudging awake the restless shadows that watched with anticipation. Together the chant built and rose in intensity, igniting the air around them, shimmering with vibrant energy. A surreal ballet of hope entwined with darkness. Gratia felt the fabric of their desires unravel around them, weaving aspiration into a tapestry of transcendence. In that crucible of creation, they stood at the precipice of destiny, fragile yet unyielding. The veils of the world began to shimmer, revealing a flicker of what lay beyond the walls, a promise of something more. But with that shimmer came a flash of doubt, an unsettling presence that brushed against Gratia's heart like a chilling breeze. It whispered warnings and promises, a cacophony of desires. Syla was a doorway to liberation or devastation, and as the shadows began to dance along the edges of their sacred circle, a thought nestled in Gratia's mind. A reminder that freedom demands sacrifice. And in this twisted city of Tricium, among demons and despair, a solitary voice entered their minds and bade them find you the archives of the lost amidst the forgotten sanctuary. Now end this ritual with haste, for I may not keep them at bay much longer. A violent gust of wind accosted the siblings, accompanied by whispers of laughter, spite, and dismay. Without hesitation, Gratia cast aside the hands of her brother and sister as she frantically moved to erase the runes earlier scribed into the ground to undo the summoning. For she understood his message. The demons almost breached their lines of communication with Syla, yet by sheer force of will his spirit was able to keep them at bay. All regaining their senses as the tides of the summoning receded, the time for reckoning had come, the plans set in stone beneath their very feet. They have a goal and a lead on how it may be achieved. Now all they had to do was hold on to each other as they danced on the edge of this precipice into the unknown, their hearts beating boldly against the encroaching night, questioning whether the path chosen would lead to peace or peril. Act 3. Starving Minds. Having taken the day to gather their thoughts and plot their course of action, they make ready to set off. As the sun dipped below the jagged horizon of the crumbling city ramparts, shadows long and twisted danced amongst the ruins. Within this grey-scale landscape, the Orvants forged their path amidst the decay of their home, haunted by despair and the animated whispers of the encroaching demonic threat. Gratia walked silently, her gaze steady and unfaltering. Every footstep echoed the silent reveries of her heart, the tender nurturer trapped in a world she could not heal. Her unkempt and tangled hair cascaded like autumn leaves around her face, obscuring her expressive, soft jade eyes that often spoke of emotions her voice could not. Off in the distance, she took note of the hues of the darkening sky. The receding light flickered like flames lashing out for fuel, slight obscured by the passing clouds, showcasing the decay before her, projecting a dim reflection of her inner turmoil. Beside her, Celia slipped through the shadows with an air of quiet determination. She wore a ragged cloak, its dark fabric blending effortlessly with the knight's veil. A tattered journal page, inked with faded hieroglyphs and scrawled notes, grasped within her hand meticulously folded, each crease a testament to a brewing plan. With his boyish bravado lace with an undercurrent of fear, Elthis strode with impatience. "Perhaps they'll understand why we didn't take up arm with them," he quipped, glancing back towards his sisters. "When we reach the forgotten sanctuary. I mean, what's a little demon infestation compared to the grace of heaven?" His words were often buoyed by misguided enthusiasm, a flame that could ignite his sister's spirits, however briefly. Amidst his ponderings, all was halted as Gratia stopped and raised her hand, signalling him to quiet as they approached an old tavern, a shell of its former self. Charred wood and remnants of wine-stained memories littered the ground. She alluded to her siblings that they are not alone. Eltis squinted at the darkness, his expression shifting as he caught sight of a hunched figure beneath the crooked archway. An elderly denizen, clad in tattered rags, puffing on a pipe, his rheumy eyes sparkling with ageless wisdom. "Ah, the Orvants," he croaked, recognizing them, his voice gravelly like the busted pavement on which they tread. "Aye, whispers are claiming you fools are seeking the forgotten sanctuary, aren't you? A bold venture in these accursed times, unless you've got a death wish." "Of course word has spread of our destination," Celia cursed beneath her breath. "The whispers are carried by the winds to every shadow." Cautioning their proximity, the three leaned in closer. Gratia knelt by the old man, offering a small rusted coin, a token that shimmered dimly in the dying light. The elder inspected it thoughtfully, the smile that broke his lips revealing teeth that mirrored the decay around them. "The sanctuary," he began, "lies beyond the howling winds we call the Death's Breath. 3 days will you wander, but it is not the path that guides you, it is the heart." Celia's eyes flared with interest. "Where do we find it? How do you know of this place?" Feigning a grin that never quite reached his eyes. "Your wit must match the angelic's resolve, my dear child. A garden they say it was once long ago, located on high, surrounded by a lake and consumed by the raging gale of a construct of ancient design who serves as guardian of the forgotten." After a pause that felt as though it took eons, his grin turned into a fit of hideous laughter, a sound that seemed to bellow from deep within his gut as he struggled to form the words. "It's an old wives' tale from long before your time." But heed my words. As laughter echoes against the deprecated wall of the tavern, his demeanour turned serious in an instant. "The constructs are made for judgment, should you falter." He let the sentence drift into the biting silence, thick with tension. "Fear not, we will take the risk." Eltis boomed, fists clenched at his sides, his resolve stubbornly immovable. With the elderly man's warnings lingering like a spectre, they set off throughout the corridors of Tricium once more. Their hearts raced like the distant drums of a funeral march, each corner they rounded lit only by the flickering torches that burned in the sunken alley, ways they call home. Days passed in a blur of doubt and fleeting glimpses of hope as they searched the vast reaches of the city limits for some semblance of the location given to them. The first night, Eltis grew restless, circling the meagre campfire they prepared within the cloistered ruins of a sectioned-off neighborhood. "There's got to be a clue somewhere. We can't give up now." Gratia placed her hand on his shoulder, her silent affirmation a balm against the growing uncertainty. Though her voice was trapped, her spirit spoke louder than words. The second night, hunger gnawed at their beings, and shadows played tricks with their minds. A scrap of parchment, half buried beneath the ashes of a long-extinguished fire, caught Celia's eye. "Look!" she exclaimed, uncovering a map, faded but suffused with arcane markings. "This must be it! The way to the sanctuary!" she proclaimed, tracing a line with her finger around an image of a vast lake. Yet for every try she made to plot a course, the pathways twisted and curled into knots, barring understanding. When the third dawn broke, Gratia's intuition leading them toward foreboding skies, the Orvant stood before a chasm laden with swirling mists. The whispers of indecipherable incantations dance with the wind. Beyond the chasm, a towering structure emerged like a nightmarish giant. Its surfaces stark and forbidding, decorated with sigils whose meanings were long lost in time. "Prepare," Celia spoke in a hushed tone. Elthis stifled a breath. "Banish the thought of failure," he bolstered. "The presumed forgotten sanctuary has appeared before them at the center of an island that resided directly in the middle of the chasm, a once great circular lake. Only one pathway was noticed, a solitary bridge, long past its prime, who sat above the now chasm riddled with currents of zephyr. As they crossed the threshold, anticipation coiled tightly in their chests. Halfway across the bridge, they notice an angelic construct materialize from the shadows below, rising like a full moon on a path directly into their orbit. Gleaming with a metallic frame, a sentinel forged from divine purpose and ancient magics. "Who dares enter the domain of the forgotten sanctuary?" Its voice boomed, resonating like the chime of distant bells. "Us!" Elthis shouted defiantly, stepping forward without even a thought of consequence. "We seek passage to the heavens." The construct's eyes lit up with unfeeling luminescence, scanning them, judging perhaps, searching for weakness. "You shall answer with truth, or truth." "What is truth in a world swallowed by darkness?" Celia challenged, following her brother's footsteps, the embers of doubt fizzling in her voice. "Is it the folly of our circumstances or the hope that drives us to seek?" A moment seemed to hang, suspended in the air as the construct analyzed them. Gratia, sensing the shift of energies, took a step closer, her presence gentle yet commanding. She grasped Eltis's arm and, in a breathless moment, drew ancient glyphs in the air, marking their intentions toward elevation. The construct hesitated, its expression flickering to a semblance of understanding, a mercy long forgotten. "Enter," it intoned finally, and the gates creaked, peeling back like waves, revealing the inner sanctuary bathed in muted light. As they turned towards their goal, the construct spoke again, only in what can be deciphered as a remorseful tone. "What you seek is folly, your truth is circumstance." Before fading back into the chasm with a rumbling and quake that almost capsized the bridge. Celia took those words to heart, ever unsure of their true meaning, but kept within the confines of her psyche. They stepped inside, hearts racing with the harmony of despair, mingling with the seed of hope. Almost ill from the adrenaline. As they wandered, cold stone etched with runes illuminated around them. Gratia's keen guidance drove them deeper into the sanctuary, coming to a lone altar at the end of a dead-end hall. Celia and Eltis both began searching for clues, for their elder sister had never led them astray. After a time, growing anxious, Eltis began inspecting the altar and the book that was closed upon it. "What have we here? Descent of the righteous, ascension of fools, huh?" He chuckled to himself. "What an unusual title! I just may take this with me and give it a read." "Never knew you to be versed in verses, brother," Celia teased. "Hey, I figure since we are going up on high, I should elevate my status a bit," he jested. "Mayhap I might even become a scholar." As he was speaking, he nonchalantly took the book off the pedestal. Almost immediately, the hallways erupted in vibrations as the floor began to give out beneath his feet. Astutely, Gratia lunged for Eltis and pulled the both of them from harm while a new passage made itself viable. For a moment's breath and a gaze of thanks, they were all safe. Down ancient stairs that spiraled beneath the altar, they encountered a damp labyrinth. Each turn of every corridor brought them to confrontation with their own fears. It was there the shadows played tricks on their minds. At the pinnacle of their angst, they stumbled upon a figure basking near a set of entwined vines. Humming to himself, bouncing rather happily left and right. As they grow near, he promptly stops, as if noticing their approach from his flank, and pauses for a brief second. Long enough to clear his throat, resume his peculiar dance and sing in a much higher pitch than before. His dulcet tones echoed through the maze, weaving tales of bliss and grief alike, and mirth intertwined with uncertainty. "Lost, are you?" he mused as he swiftly about-faced, eyes dancing with secrets. Eltis huffed, eager to reclaim their momentum. "We seek the path. A quest for light, how sublime! But such journeys often tread the borders of shadows. What will you trade for knowledge?" The bard leans in close, his smile both inviting and disconcerting. "Anything!" Eltis shouted, the word echoing off the damp stones, followed by the sounds of water droplets reconvening with their ilk, a puddle beneath the vines. Gratia clasped her hands together, heart unabated, eyes piercing through to plunge into the depth of his enigma. "Then let the labyrinth reveal the innermost shadows of your essence," he proposed, strumming his lute to reverberate like a heartbeat in anticipation. With a gulp of steely resolve, Celia stepped forward, ready to pay whatever price for the truth lurking beyond. Their lives, their souls, their very beings intertwined in the echoes of this nameless bard. In this darkened labyrinth, the promise of ascension lay just within reach, yet so did the shadows. The anguished cries of their desires whispered dangerously, urging them deeper toward what was yet uncharted, where even the stars could not guide their way. Act 4, Feast of Eternal Folly. Chilling was the atmosphere within the labyrinth, leaving the marrow of the Avanti siblings' bones aching as they navigated its winding paths. Shadows cradled their forms in an unyielding embrace, twisting the light of their flickering torches into shivering shapes that danced along the stone walls. Eltis kept his gaze fixed ahead, a defiant flicker in his eyes, while Celia wore her thoughts like armor, dissecting every echo she heard. Gratia maintained a tranquil aura of serenity against the encroaching dread of the labyrinth. Draped in secrecy, the bard hummed melodies that wove through the corridors with forgotten lore. His tune, hauntingly beautiful, carried the voices of death and yearning, of dreams and catatonia. As the party ventured further, the bard began to speak in riddles and chanted of trials that must be overcome. His voice a fluid cascade of sound that carried all the richness of ancient tales. "You must forgo the trials of Trinity. he intoned, a shimmer of something dark flitting across his eyes. Each trial demands solitude and much resilience. You will each face your own selves, but understand this. It is in facing your truest self that you will find the knowledge you seek. Only through embracing your truths will you earn the right to advance. Eltis audibly shivered, both from fear and anticipation. Having played out tales of heroism and sacrifice in his youth, he was eager to prove himself, to carve a name into the annals of time's legacy. Yet the mantra of solitary trials prickled at the edges of his enthusiasm. Celia raised an eyebrow, her mind racing with predictive assessments. What are these trials? How do we prepare for what we cannot foresee? She had always been the pragmatist, the one who preferred the solid ground of calculable risks over leap-of-faith acts found within heroism. Gratia took a measured breath, her deep gaze fixed on her siblings. She offered them comfort, her presence like a shelter against the coming storms. They all felt the tremors of uncertainty curling around them like ivy, testing the roots of their familial bonds. In a swift motion, the bard turned, a knowing smile on his lips, and without another word, he gestured towards a bend in the path, as to say, "This way." With every step, the siblings were engulfed by the monstrous maw of the labyrinth, drawn into its daunting depths. The air thickened, a palpable barrier that pushed against them as if the labyrinth sought to trap their very essence within its walls. The passages seemed haunted, filling their minds with fleeting images of what was, rather what could have been. Yet, something larger loomed, a sense that destiny was interlocking threads among them. In the next breath of a moment, they reached a doorway, beneath the arch of which hung a sign carved from the stone that read, "Penitence." The gesturous bard halted, bowing slightly, a gesture that was both welcoming and ominous. "You shall begin here, lad. Your trial awaits." With a bolstered heart, Eltis stepped forth reluctantly. Upon breaching the threshold, in but an instant, the darkness claimed him, leaving his sisters to grapple with the silence of his absence. Elthis! The world closed in as Elthis stumbled into the chamber beyond the doorway. Spectres writhed and surged against the stone confines, greedy for his light. His pulse thundered in his ears. He was alone in a realm that demanded more than his courage. It thirsted for atonement. "'Tis only me, and I am sorry," he whispered, a promise echoing in his mind while the Geists beckoned. Visions of his misdeeds spiraled into view. A cacophony of regret clawed at his heart. Friends abandoned, promises broken. These apparitions of his past wove a rope of torment that ensnared his senses. Each memory became vivid and harrowing, tearing at the very fabric of his spirit. An image of his sister, whose laughter had turned to tears because he failed to defend her against cruel mockery, materialized before him. "Do you remember? You ran away when I needed you most," the vision mocked, spectrally fading into a grimace. "Stop it!" Elthis roared, his voice breaking through the oppressive silence. Yet the shadows answered only with laughter, echoing the cruel verses of his own mind. Surrounded by darkness, he understood. This trial was not just a fight, it was a confrontation with the self he feared, a bitter reckoning with his shortcomings. He was his own worst enemy, and to overcome this trial, he would need to inflict pain upon himself, the very pain he sought to escape. With gritty determination, he reached for the sharp dagger strewn about the floor nearby, its edge gleaming with contemptuous allure. It spoke unto him promises of pain and relief in equal measure, yet he knew. It was only by embracing this truth that he could begin to stand above his failures. Celia's heart raced as she crossed into her own trial, the doorway closing behind her with a disheartening finality. The chamber she found herself in was a void, an inky expanse devoid of sound or light. Umbral, the sign had promised. Anxiety slinked through her veins as her senses began to dull in the oppressive isolation. In her mind, the mechanics began turning as she tried to dissect her predicament. Yet there was no tangible equation here, only the suffocating silence that pressed against her like a lover in the night. Here, in this darkness, she would confront her fear of madness. Like a ballet in hell, visions began to dance at the edges of her perception. Tendrils of chaos crept in, questioning her motives in a way that rattled her core. What if you forget the ones you love? What if their faces fade into scribbles? Behind bated breath, the oxygen grew thick with dread, and she felt the grasping fingers of isolation settle around her mind like a vice. Frantically, she scrambled to keep her sanity intact as memories began to warp and contort. Visions spiraled, showcasing friends that melted into non-existence, their laughter stolen by the relentless ravages of dementia, a fear that long haunted her. "Not like this," she whispered, desperation in her enunciation. The darkness amplified her mental turmoil, her psyche manifesting every imperfection, every errant thought. She could feel it. It was a fog that wrapped itself around her intelligence, seeking to consume her sanity. And then realization struck. In this darkness, she had power. Dialogue with her inner phantoms wasn't her weakness. Acknowledging the chaos was her path to victory. "I will choose clarity no matter what," she proclaimed into the void, reclaiming her mind from the abyss. With that declaration, she felt the shadows recede, wrapping themselves tighter against her will, until finally the stillness morphed into vibrant clarity. Gratia stepped through the gate that read "Spoken" with an air of serene conviction. There was no hesitation, no shred of doubt to ensnare her heart. As she entered, she found herself devoid of sound, alone in a vast white expanse that stretched endlessly around her. But it was not silence that permeated the air. It was anticipation, the quiet before the storm. Visions began flooding her mind, shapes she recognized vividly, a collage of everyone she adored, ripping before her eyes like melodic echoes from the past. Her friends, siblings, parents, even pets long lost, each face a reminder of the bonds forged through love. Yet the tranquility shattered as shadows closed in, shackling her loved ones before her like a fly to a web. Followed behind the shadows, a being of immense power appeared, a god perhaps, spectral in its authority, observing with an inscrutable gaze. The echoes of their cries filled her ears, their faces contorted in anguish as they reached for her, a torment that twisted into a spiral of despair. Even from the distance of her consciousness, she felt their pain, as if it was her own soul being stabbed endlessly. "Speak, or they will perish time and time again within your view." The god's voice throbbed around her, a cruel ultimatum that sent fear coursing through her heart. Gratia stood rooted in place, paralyzed by the stark reality of her voicelessness. Yet perhaps it was in this silence they endured, where her nurturing heart could never utter the apologies she knew they deserved. Tears pooled in her eyes as she stared, crushed by the weight of sorry mingled with her own helplessness. Drawing in breath, she understood her truth. In silence, she had grown accustomed to not being heard, becoming but a shadow in her own life. Her silence had stolen not just her voice, but the power to advocate for those she loved. From the depths of her inner workings, desperate and raw, she mustered all her strength to chase out the solitary word, please. In that moment, the enormity of her silence shattered, and with her newfound voice, she howled into the void, let them go. Within that very moment, the visions, the shadows, the God ceased to exist. Her hands grasped her mouth, fingers interlocked as she fell to her knees sobbing. She could sense that something was amiss. Within the fragments, if their trials, Elthis battled his inner demons. Celia conquered the tempest of her mind. Gratia found her voice. One by one, they emerged from their respective nightmares, with an ethereal light flooding their forms, uniting them once again, but not as they were before. Their trials had transformed them, each carrying the burdens and triumphs of self-discovery as they converged in the archives of the lost. Reunited at last, they looked upon one another with renewed intensity. They began scanning the countless tomes lined on the melancholic shelves, ages of wisdoms and secrets at their fingertips. Hours, maybe even days, slipped by as they scoured the ancient library, deciphering every text they could just to learn how to decipher the next. And yet, as if by instinct, they were all drawn to a singular tome bound in a silver fleece. The title embossed in golden script, Historia of Time. Their eyes met, a shared understanding shimmering in the air. Here lay the knowledge they sought. As they gathered around it, an overwhelming sense of destiny washed across them, binding the siblings not just as kin, but as survivors of trials crafted to unveil their truest selves. Gratia reached forward to turn the pages, and with each leaf unfurling their saga unfolded, Kindle igniting with the magic of what was yet to come. "Read it, Celia," Elthis urged. Celia adjusted her fragile glasses, her keen eyes alight with fervour. "Let's see what truths lie within," she replied, her tone flat yet laden with expectation. She leaned forward, drawing on the energy that danced within the pages. As the first line unfurled beneath her tongue, the words came alive. In that dreadful silence, darkness seemed to gather around them, waiting, fading gracefully into the unknown. In the beginning, creation stirred beneath the heavens, and the tapestry of existence began to weave itself, she read, her voice growing steady. Elthis peered over her shoulder, a knot of apprehension tightening in his chest. He was a warrior forged in the fires of strife, yet here, beneath the weight of forgotten lore, he felt small, vulnerable. "What does it mean?" he murmured. "Does it tell of how we may ascend?" Paying him no mind, Celia continued, her voice reverberated through the hall. Each phrase unveiled horrors that rubbed raw against their sense. Wars fought with sword and gun made of shadow and blood, from which peace had once bloomed, withered away into nothingness. How Earth was claimed by calamity centuries past. Her eyes grew wide as she skimmed the next passage before narrating it. She recited the tale of ancient gods and demons clashing in a tumultuous fray. Elthis felt the ground shift beneath him as she went on, and had to take knee so not to collapse. They learned of the great celestial wars, where all the angel and archangel descended to the realm below, abandoning their thrones. They fought for humanity, eventually joined by their god in battle, only to vanish into the maelstrom of eternity at the strength of the demons who had finally taken over Earth. Before perishing, God ushered the remnants of humanity through the gates of heaven to refuge that became known as Tricium. Staring blankly ahead, Gratia's aura shifted for the first time and grew a cold that may leave one riddled with frostbite had they got too near. Elthis summarized, "Where we've struggled, strived to survive, lost and chose to leave behind. We were within the kingdom of heaven, all our—" His voice gives out as he fights to keep the tears from welling within his eyes. Celia's voice pressed on, unravelled by an insatiable thirst for uncovering knowledge. Yet, her breath quivered and unveiled another verse. A prophecy has been revealed. One day, the Trinity shall rise again within these very halls, imbued with the Spirit of the Almighty, gaining immense powers unbeknownst to mortals. They shall descend into the very bowel of hell and rise. Elthis shuddered in a fit of horror. We must not, we cannot, she continued. Risen, they shall ascend to the earthly plane and rise. Risen, they once again will ascend to the heavens and rise. They will raise their luminous banner and be praised as all rise. At that very moment, Gratia slammed the book shut in a fit of rage, not wanting to hear another word. For she can't take any more, her brother whimpering on the floor, her sister engrossed in her studies like a lunatic, herself wrought with a sense that she's been betrayed her whole life. A bundle of anger, fear, sadness and desolation had amassed in her within her and promptly opened, overwhelming her. Even through all this, she kneels down to comfort Elthis and at the same time reaches across to hold Celia's hand. Staring at the Historia, mind racing, Celia finally muttered beneath her breath, "So be the will of a dead god." Act 5. Descent of Salvation. Are we really doing this? Elthis asked, glancing over at his sisters. Gratia stared resolutely at the door leading deeper into the heart of the archive. What choice do we have left? There's nothing for us here, Celia spoke in a firm voice, yet the tremor in her hands betrayed her facade. There's no other recourse but search for the rift beyond this pass. She recalled a passage about it in one of the dusty old books she perused through just earlier. We can become something more, something better than this wretched life, or become nothing at all. But it will be our choice. Together, Elthis breathed out in a dramatic sigh. Gratia turned back at the both of them and gave a hearty nod. As they proceeded further towards their final destination, the musty scent of old parchment and ink burned at their nostrils. Their footsteps timid, barely audible over the faint breeze that sighed through the ancient stacks. A latent energy can be felt pulsing, heard crackling, growing faster and louder, as if it were a corps of drums readying for a skirmish. Look, Celia whispered, motioning toward the back room. Lights of turquoise, jade and amethyst flicker through the cracks of an old, weathered door. They seem to breathe as if alive, inviting yet foreboding. Eltis's voice pierced her thoughts. What if it's not what we expect? It is our only chance, she returned, gritting her teeth. Hearts racing, the urge to preserve their fragile bond pushing them forward. No matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. Drawing closer, the three exchanged glances, each sibling masking their fear with determination. The door creaked in protest as they pushed it open, revealing a chamber steep in an aurora dancing through a rather bright type of darkness. with multiple stars twinkling as if so distant, although the room isn't as large as one would think. An inexplicable energy enveloped them as they entered, gasping in unison at the magnificence their eyes beheld. In the center of the room was an undulating form of formless energy with swirling tendrils of light and shadow entwined in a tempestuous dance. It was not merely an opening in the fabric of space, but a spectacle of chaos and beauty. Each flicker seemed to beckon them closer, promising potential futures and choices they yearned to make. Elthis stepped forward, his eyes wide. "So we just jump in then? We must be willing to sacrifice everything since we've come so far. What of our lives, our souls, our love for each other? It's simple, really. Shall we hold hands?" Celia pauses before speaking, for she notices a smirk on Gratia's face. "You, always with your speeches, alas. I adore my corny little brother." "Whatever awaits us, we face it together," Eltis affirmed, though his voice trembled on the edge of resolve. "Together," echoed Celia, as Gratia stepped forward and grabbed a hand from each of them. As if a pact woven into their spirits was made, they shared one last glance at each other. And with a final breath, they leaped, diving into the inferno of possibility, surrendering themselves to the promise of either an adventure beyond their wildest dreams or a silence that would echo into eternity. RooT, Book 1 End, by Mars O.T.E.